Welcome. You're listening to My Magical Horse, the podcast, where we are getting curious about animal communication. I am your host, Jordan Banks, and if you are desiring a more magical connection with your own horse, you are in the right place. Join us as we rediscover our sense of wonder, experience the joy, and feel the magic that horses can and do bring to our lives each and every day. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you for spending your time with us. Now let's get started. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Tracy Rainwaters to our second episode. Tracy is a human and animal chiropractor, a shamanic practitioner, and an interspecies intuitive channel. I've worked with Tracy many times over the past few years, and in fact, my very first animal communication class was one that she facilitated over Zoom a couple years back. I've also done a shamanic healing session with her, had her come to teach some breath work to participants in one of my Working Equitation Clinics, and most recently, I took part in her Alchemy of the Soul program. Welcome, Tracy. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jordan, for having me. I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to, before I dive into all the questions, I was wondering if you wanted to describe to our listeners what you do and how you feel you help facilitate animal communication through your work, through your practice with your clients.
Yeah, I mean, have spent the majority of my career, the last 18 years, specializing in equine chiropractic. And, I grew up always having a sense of being connected to my intuition, even if I didn't fully understand how that was happening. But it was really my work in doing chiropractic work on horses that I feel like they actually taught me the art and the skill of communicating. And due to one of my parents, having a very serious form of bone cancer, that got me introduced to shamanism off the recommendation of a friend. I went and saw a shaman, had a healing session. That kind of blew my world wide open. So I did a very intensive 2-year shamanic training program, and it was really my curiosity in learning how to do that style of energy healing. I kind of just decided one day, I'm like, oh, I just want to see if this works, on horses. And what I found through that process is I would do a shamanic healing on the horses, and the humans would have a really big, like, emotional shift and response. So that has essentially led me to where I am today, where I still have a very small equine chiropractic practice in California. And I primarily facilitate, I do teach animal communication through my animal soul channeling classes. And then, like you said, you just participated in my first Alchemy of the Soul program, which is a shamanic based 8-week course in learning how to do shamanic journeys, really for us to come into higher alignment with our heart and our soul's wisdom. So it really is my passion in life to help animals and humans build bridges of communication and really helping humans open their heart to the healing magic and the wisdom that the animal kingdom has here to offer us.
I love that. And I love,
Yep.
I listened to your little reels that you put on Instagram. I think
Yeah.
every week you do that.
I mean, I try, but it's hard. It's hard to be
Um,
consistent sometimes.
yeah, it's fascinating to me actually because you're tapping into the energy more more than just horses, all animals, but even other living beings. Like, can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, I kind of joke and I say nobody is more surprised than me that my path has like sort of shifted into this cosmic aspect of who we are as beings and who our animals are. And it really, I would say over the last 5 years, my animal communication, it's always been weighted more in the spiritual and in ways that I don't fully understand. I can only really attribute it to like the deep. I call it, like, I do feel like I'm just incredibly nosy sometimes, but I feel like I have this tremendous curiosity around like why we're here, like what is the soul's journey? I'm I really like deep connections. So I think there was a curiosity within me that allowed for a certain openness that when I was communicating with animals, that more of their higher conscious self, so more of their soul wisdom would come through instead of just the personality self that we would receive in what I would call kind of typical animal communication. And I'm not implying that one is better than the other, but um, I often tell my students like the answers we get are typically as good as the questions that we ask. So it was really about being open to, allowing this higher vibrational wisdom to come forward. It felt like very heart-centered wisdom coming forward, where the animals would talk about, their soul's purpose for being in certain bodies that they have, like the soul contracts that they have with their humans and what they're here to teach them. And as I've just deepened into that, I feel like it's cats and horses in particular have started to take me, it feels like a very cosmic experience when I go in to do these sessions where they've even started talking about, the work that their souls do even before they come into a physical body. So I really feel like I have the animals to thank for expanding, I think, my curiosity and sort of taking me on, this cosmic journey of really looking like at our soul's blueprint, like what is our soul's journey and soul's experience before we even came here on Earth, and the wisdom and the magic that we and all of our animals carry and that we're anchoring here on planet Earth. And, how we're gifting that, to the other beings in our life. So that I feel like has really become one of my favorite aspects of the work that I do. I do feel like it is a bit of a specialty in the channeling work that I do, is really looking at the higher spiritual connections between animals and humans, and really looking at the energetic blueprints of like, what are we here to create in this life, and how can our animals be our spiritual guides through that process?
I love that because I do feel like my animals are very much my spiritual guides.
Yeah.
I know at one point on that topic of the, kind of the more day-to-day thing versus the deeper spiritual side, I know at one point you were offering the sessions like people could choose like a soul channeling versus an animal communication session. Are you still offering them like that, or how does your offer look?
Yeah, so now I just call them a soul channeled healing. Because what I found, I've had to learn how to like market stuff online in my chiropractic practice. Like I wasn't legally allowed to like really advertise. So it's just been a very different experience growing this business. And I found there's quite a bit of confusion, I think, just around animal communication in general. And then to add in soul channeling, which is actually a name that I've come up with, and then adding the shamanic healing as well. Like people never knew which one would
Mhm.
that was kind of the right fit for them. And often, well, I shouldn't say often, but sometimes people will have experiences with other animal communicators, and they'll come into my session and it's very channeled instead of just conversational. So it felt hard to it was like a lot of extra behind the scenes work and helping people kind of pick what they wanted to do. And when in reality, I feel like most of my sessions start kind of conversationally and then they click into this higher vibrational channeled wisdom. And I often feel like sometimes the conversation itself that is the healing, that is the thing that's needed. So I kind of just allow that if a shamanic healing needs to happen in that session, it felt so much more concise and so much easier for it all just to be one offering. And then each session kind of gets to blossom and unfold in a way that is in the best and highest good of the animal and their people. Um, yeah, so it's made it a little bit easier, just easier for me. And I've gotten better too at kind of prepping people. Um, in that I often will tell people when they come into a session, like it's great to have an intention. And I feel like my website, I've done a better job of sort of explaining, that we're gonna, have the potential to tap into some higher, soul wisdom stuff. And when I feel cosmic information come through, because sometimes animals will start talking about lifetimes or experiences they've had with their humans before they even came here on Earth. Like I will often ask people if they're open to that because I've had just one person, but sometimes people like when they're not prepared for that, or that can be really outside of their comfort zone. If they're not expecting something like that, I do like to give them a little heads up and just make sure that that's an experience that they're open to having.
So you're doing this with them live over Zoom typically?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I do everything over Zoom, and
Okay.
I think with our experiences too, like my work has also evolved. I used to do everything written out,
Mm.
and I feel like my channeling really came in. It started as very much like I would say trance channeling, but it was very much access through me writing. Like it helped me get into the meditative space for me to do it. And then I would actually go back and retype everything and like send it to people. And I'm really bad at typing. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like so much extra legwork. So I really trained myself to be able to do it in the moment typing. And
That's
then a
really
few,
cool.
yeah, it took me a while too to have the courage, like to
Yeah.
literally look someone in the eye because I do keep my eyes closed, like my body moves. It's kind of an uncomfortable space to be in, but it's so much more efficient just to do it live in real time. I send people an audio recording, and it also allows the humans to really engage. It helps me fill in information. I can ask them questions. They can ask questions as the session's unrolling.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. I
yeah,
per the writing piece, because I'm very early in this learning how to do this. And that's what I found works really well for me at this
yeah.
stage is the writing. But
Mhm.
actually now might be a good time. I'm when I did that class with you, and it was back
Mhm.
in 2022.
Yeah, it seems
um
so long ago.
yeah, you had asked us if anybody wanted to offer their animals to be used in the class that you were teaching, and I had just recently lost my Cane Corso Vino, and so you did a session with him as a thank you for using him in one of your classes. Wasn't the one that I was in, but
Yeah,
it was another
yeah,
class. And
yeah.
I just wanted to read, so I do have this printout that you had written. And I just want to read a
Wonderful.
couple things that he said because they were, I feel like they were so powerful, and I feel like they were really good wisdom for everybody to hear. I
Yeah.
think I shared it at one point on my Facebook a couple months ago, but so this was in June of 2022, and you had reached out to him, and I just wanted to read where you had asked him if he could share what it was like where he is, because he had passed away. And he said, I am in a cosmic web of all that is. It is exquisite. Do not fear that which is not physical. We are all birthed from love. There is an expansiveness to love that humanity has only touched the edges of. Animals serve as guideposts and reminders to humanity that we come from love. We are all the embodiment of love. And if you really embraced this concept, fear would fall away. The trajectory of the earth is actually quite stable. You may not believe it, but all really is well. Many shifts and changes will continue to occur, but we are here guiding and assisting each and every one of you. And then he said, I'm going to find another part. He said, being in a body on earth is a joy. Please utilize your life fully to be the embodiment of joy and wonder. Do not get tangled in the 3D reality that is in a state of crumbling. Aim higher. Find peace, joy, and live a life from there. Be clear about your needs. Take time to fully visualize all that you want out of your life. Do not settle for less. I leave in love. So I just wanted to share, though that was just a little excerpt from the full thing, but I just felt like that in the state that the world is in right now,
Yeah.
I feel like
Mhm.
that was a really powerful message for everybody to hear. And also his words that it was exquisite. He's in this cosmic web of all that is. And I know that we have so much unknown about what
Mhm.
happens after we leave this planet. But
Yeah.
and I also know that you don't remember all of the sessions that you
Well,
do because you have so
it's
many. So I like, well, I'm just going to share this little piece, and then
it's so
um
beautiful to hear because even, hopefully this helps people listening, when you step into a channeled state, it's really allowing your conscious self to take a back seat to the energy of something else coming through. So while in the moment when I'm doing it, like I still have an awareness of who I am and what's coming through me. But once I close out a session and close sacred space, it really is out of my awareness. So it's so beautiful for me even to rehear that. And yeah, it
Yeah,
feels so relevant for all that is happening in the world right now. So thank you for sharing.
that's how I feel too. And actually, there's just one other thing he said. He said, I wish people to know that animals serve dual purposes. We live in physical bodies as an embodiment of a higher truth. When animals and humans connect, it's a feeling of universal love, and not all are willing to receive it. I was merely a reminder of the divine grace and beauty that exists everywhere.
Mm.
Anyway, I just wanted to
It's
share it
so
because I
beautiful.
I have gone back to this so many times just to kind of warm my soul about
Yeah.
his role in my life. And,
Mhm.
even though I know he left, I still talk to him. I still talk to him as if he's
Mhm.
here all the
Yeah.
time because I feel like he is.
Mhm.
Um, and there was much more that he said, but I just felt like for the listeners that could give them a taste of maybe the higher the more soulful, the soul channeling piece of it. I felt like that
Yeah.
was very much what that was.
Yeah. And I think it's just as you were talking to, I'm like, this feels important to share that, I've it has always been my experience that animals are a magnificent expression of love. Even animals who have had, whether it's trauma, abuse, hardship, anything that we as humans would look at and go, "Well, perhaps we would, it would trigger a tremendous amount of compassion, perhaps, almost seeing them as victims in one way or another. And what I always find so interesting is animals don't hold themselves in that regard. And even communicating with animals and channeling for animals that have been through tremendous hardship, there's always a higher perspective and a love that comes through. And I think that is something that really can be confusing for people a little bit because I think humans often think that animals hold the same level of judgment that we do. And I would say, as an animal communicator in a channel, I mean, one of the trickiest things is to really let my own emotions, like really forcing that to take a back seat and to really be authentically open to an animal's experience. But I think the questions I get from people all the time is like, does my animal love me? They always love you. Like they wouldn't be in your life if there wasn't an expression of love there. So regardless of how we've shown up for them, even if we feel like in some ways we could have or should have done better, um, after now probably thousands of animals, I've never had them not feel tremendous love for their human counterpoints. And to me, it's always a little bit of a red flag when people have experiences with animal communicators, and if there's a lot of judgment or shame that comes through in this session, I'm like, to me, that's
Mm.
perhaps human interference in the communication coming through, because I feel like animals are so much wanting to help us open our hearts and feel love and to really provide us with a positive way to move forward. So I've had animals be kind of abrupt with their humans, but I've never had it not be completely backed in love.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful. I
yeah.
I now after that, I don't even know what questions to ask you
Oh,
because that
gotcha.
was
I'm
so
sorry.
deep. No, it was so deep. I guess kind of on that same topic, because my mission with this podcast is to educate people about what animal communication is, and
Mhm.
also I know that a lot of people are still really skeptical about
Mhm.
if it's real, or how do they know that they're finding a good communicator, or um, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because like I said before, I've been immersing myself in this for the past year plus. And so
Mhm.
for me, I'm just fully embracing that I believe in animal communication now and my own experiences with my animals, my
Mhm.
horses and my dogs. But I know I've had instances where I didn't realize somebody else didn't believe in it. And I guess
Mhm.
what could you say to people who are maybe just a little bit skeptical, a little bit on
Yeah.
the edge of not really sure if this is real? What
Yeah.
would your message be to them?
I've gotten to where like I now love this question. And I feel like this is where my shamanic perspective of how I view the world and how I walk in the world is perhaps could be really helpful to people. So I feel that everything that exists on this planet has an energy, it's made of energy. Like everything around us is vibrating at a frequency. And there is a wavelength, there is an energy that then emanates off of everything. So we can make it as scientific or as kind of expanded out there and as fluffy as you want. But really, when it comes down to it, everything is energetic. And I really feel that we are all existing in this universal web of interconnectedness. So just because something doesn't have a larynx, just because it doesn't have vocal cords and a voice box, doesn't mean that there isn't tremendous consciousness and sentience to other beings. So consciousness being the conscious thought of being able to understand that you are a being. And I've even found trees that have this deep understanding that they're a tree. And they have this deep understanding of the messages, the wisdom, the beauty, and the grace that they're anchoring here on earth. And when we look at how conscious and sentient like trees are, their ability to communicate and to feel into one another is really vast. It's just the method and how they communicate is very different, but there's still a consciousness there. There's still an awareness. So especially when I look at animals, anyone who's been around an animal, anyone who's loved an animal, I don't know how anyone can be around them and to not see that there is conscious thought, like there is deep emotion, there's deep intelligence that exists within our animals, but just because they don't speak the way that we do doesn't mean that they're not communicating. Um, One of my biggest barriers to animal communication is I thought, because I had had intuitives tell me for years that I was an animal communicator, and I always thought like, well, that would be fun and that would be amazing, but I thought I should be able to walk into a barn and just hear horses talking to me, that I should be able to have that clairaudient ability to just hear their voices and to have a conversation much like you and I are having. And for me, that's not my primary form of intuition. I mean, mine is imagery and like this deep sense of knowing, which, so I really had to learn how to build those skills. But my husband is very supportive, but I would also say like a bit skeptical. And the thing I also ask people, it's like, well, if you encountered another being that could communicate telepathically by either sending an emotion or sending an image, would you see them as a lesser being? Meaning that they would somehow be less intelligent than us. And he was like, well, absolutely not. Excuse me. And I'm like, well, but that's how animals and the earth and the plants, everything around us communicates. And to me, when we look at indigenous cultures and how they were able to know what plants would be medicinal and for what purpose, it's my deep feeling that the shamans and the indigenous peoples knew that we were all connected. I mean, it's so a part of their worldview that they would just ask a plant, like, can you help? Or what is your healing property? Like, are you safe to consume?
Mhm.
And perhaps there was some trial and error, but I feel like it's something that we as humans has really lost. We've really lost. We see ourselves separate as nature. And I think the most appalling thing is we see ourselves above all of it, not realizing that not only are we killing our ecosystem, but it's also killing our hearts. I mean, I don't know how we have a really solid pathway forward until we can really open our hearts, drop into the space of our hearts, and to feel how deeply loved and interconnected we are in everything. So I would say to people who are really skeptical, like, it's okay to be skeptical. Like, I actually don't have a judgment around that. But just because you haven't opened to a certain experience doesn't mean it's not happening. And when we see everything around us as alive and conscious on some level and sentient on some level, so consciousness is this ability to know that you're a being. We could say sentience is having the ability to feel something. How can that not provide a level of communication? It's our job, I feel, as the human. Like we are all intuitive beings. Like it is easier for some people versus others, but our primary source of intuition is actually our physical body and our energy body. So it's the bioelectric field that comes off of our body, and it's how our body receives all of that information. So I often tell people it's like learning a new language or having to relearn a language. It's really learning like what are your primary forms of intuition and being able to foster that. And once you do, like sending and receiving information, when we just trust And this is the hardest thing. It's like if we can just turn our monkey mind off and just trust that we have this innate ability to do it, the pathways can become open and clear. But I feel like one of the biggest challenges is if you see yourself disconnected from nature and that everything is just sort of flat around you and doesn't have any sort of energy to it, I'm like, well, that's kind of it's a big barrier to sort of leap over to opening your heart to communicating in a different way.
Yeah, I like what you said about feeling like you should be able to walk into the barn and that you could just hear them
Mhm.
talking to you, because also I want that.
Yeah.
But
A part of me, I mean, I'm like, it would make things so easy and clear, right? If we, and
yeah,
you know, I don't know that it happens for a lot of people, but for some people, that is their experience. They are like incredibly
yeah,
clairaudient.
yeah.
I would say after working with horses for almost 2 decades, I'm like, and also just knowing how empathic I am, I'm actually grateful that that's not my primary way because it would be harder to turn off.
That's
Because
true.
sometimes it's like you've got to create, especially for really empathic people, it's like we have to be able to have a little bit of boundary around us so that we can actually have peace in our life and not have information just flooding us all of the time.
Yeah, that's
So
so
it's
true.
like the thing I wanted, but now I'm like, now that it's not I've had to really train that clairaudient sense, and I'm like, it's like an on-demand thing that I can tap into. It's like a radio dial I can kind of turn on, and then when I'm done, it like gets turned off. But
The radio dial to the frequency, right? Is that,
yeah,
yeah.
or just even to that method of communicating.
Oh,
But I feel like I get a lot of like I kind of tell people I'm a super feeler. Like I can kind of feel into everything, and now that I have some control, like an awareness and some control over that, like I'm so grateful for it. But man, it wreaked a lot of havoc in my life for the first 30 years of my life because I didn't understand that so much of what I was feeling wasn't actually mine. I thought everything I felt was like my own emotional state,
that
which is
leads,
a little chaotic.
yeah, that leads into my next question actually is per like sensations in your body, how do you
Mhm.
know if it's yours or if it's not, if it's an animal's or
Mhm.
somebody else's, pain, or, if you're getting a message physically through a physical sensation, how do you determine that if it's yours or not yours?
So one of the things that I do, and it's taken a lot of practice. I would say so much of this is a practice. It isn't just something we understand in our mind and then we have it. It is like learning to be around horses or to work with horses on the ground through groundwork or riding. Like there is a practice, there is a little bit of a skill set that is required. So for me, it's also kind of learning, like when intuitive information comes to my body, for some reason, it often tends to come from the right. It'll kind of hit through an energy center and then move through the left. But when I feel something, and sometimes it's an emotional state, that feels like it's kind of coming out of nowhere, or it's like, God, I've had a really great day. Like, why do I have a headache right now? Like, why? Like kind of knowing your own triggers and like feeling stuff in your body that you're like, ah, this is kind of out of character for me. I usually have to stop myself and even ask, kind of do an internal check and go like, is this mine or is this someone else's? Like I had to do that for many years. And when I'm like, oh, this isn't mine, there's whatever this feeling is either it's a horse I'm going to work on, later in the day, or it's someone else's here. I would like thank it and acknowledge it. And then I would just do the conscious command that I'm like, that has to go back for it to like wherever it came.
That's
So for me, it was like a lot of internal checks and having to be very curious about how you feel in your body. And most of us aren't really tuned in. Most of us aren't really embodied in the sense of like we're walking through the world really connected to our physical senses. So that's where I think breath work is great. Like even just breathing, you don't have to breathe in any fancy way, but just regulating your breath expands your energy field and it kind of brings you into your physical self. And often through the breath, like if I have like a pit in my stomach, there's a grief feeling that I'll feel. And it's this really uncomfortable feeling in my stomach. It's like emotionally uncomfortable. And sometimes like I'll have to just stop and breathe when I was starting this. Now I know what to do with it, but it's like I breathe and I bring the breath down into whatever I'm feeling in my body. So if it's in my stomach, When I breathe in, I'll imagine my breath going into what I'm feeling to bring some awareness to that area. And as I'm breathing, I then ask it, like, is this mine or is it someone else's? And sometimes I'll ask, like, is there something I need to do with this? Is there something I need to know here? And if it's just truly someone else's that I'm empathically picking up on, it's like I thank it, and that it's like you need to like leave my physical body. It's like a thank you, but that needs to go somewhere else. And if it's like for a being that I'm going to work with that day, it's like, thank you, that's wonderful information. You thank it, and then it's like that needs to go back and we'll deal with it like when the time is right. And then if it's mine, then it's up to me to kind of decide like how and what I do with that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just
Yeah.
curious because sometimes I feel things and I'm trying to figure out if it's mine or my mare because we're really connected.
Mhm.
Um, and you know, that actually brings me up to another question about what I've learned, what I have learned so far in my own little journey of learning how to communicate with animals. And I don't feel like I'm an expert by any means, but um the opening, the setting the space and calling them in, protecting the space and calling them in, and then when you're done you're supposed to close the space, to kind of to close off that connection. With my own horses, I want them to be able to reach out to me at any time.
Mhm.
Is that okay to leave that connection open, or
Well, I would say with your own personal animals, that heart connection's always there. Like
okay.
it's always established. So I would still say, like, if you're going to sit down with intention, or if you're working with one of your horses and opening those lines of communication, for me, it's always about like creating a heart cord, like heart to heart, or, flowing information heart to heart. Um, I still feel like it's important to close that out. I would say, especially for intuitive people, like you will always be connected to your own animals. You can always kind of mentally pop in and check in with them, and they are always like it's having, the ability to connect in with us. So just because we close a session space or to close sacred space with your own animals, they still have the ability to reach you. So it's not like they can't.
Okay.
But and that's where it's like it kind of depends on how you're receiving information, because it can, for some people, be disruptive to be energetically, because you are like extending your energy to another being, and to sort of always have your energy flowing outward to other beings can be really energetically draining. And that's something people ask a lot. They were like, do you get really fatigued doing this work? And the honest answer is like, I don't. Actually, the opposite thing tends to happen. Um, but I've also learned that I'm so clear about when I'm doing a session, like I'm open and ready to receive. And when we're done, it's like everybody's energy has to go back, from to where it belongs. Um, and that's to protect my own energy. And especially if you're working with other people, other animals, I think so it's important to create that intentional disconnect over that conversation. It's like having a conversation with someone over the phone or over Zoom, and it's like when the conversation's over, you hang up the phone, but you could certainly pick up the phone and like dial them again and have another conversation. But there is some good clarity that should happen as to when we're being that intuitively and energetically open and when we're not.
Okay, that's good
Yeah.
tip. That's a good tip.
Yeah.
um I'm just thinking about how, when you said you did like a 2-year shamanic
Mhm.
training. Did you feel like you could communicate with animals before that, or did that come in after you did the shamanic training?
I feel like I've always been an animal communicator. Like when I really look back on my life, I feel like it was always happening. And I kind of fall into the camp of like, it always felt wild to me that people felt like animals couldn't, that they couldn't communicate. That just never felt authentic. And I'm like, just because I don't know how to do something doesn't mean it's not possible.
Right.
Um, but I really feel like it was my shamanic training. And it's not that we learned how to communicate with animals, but just how to be spiritually present to ourselves, how to go on a shamanic journey, how to work with energy, how to create energetic boundaries. it really taught me, it felt like I became very masterful over my own energy and how I could use that as a resource. So I feel like, yes, I was already working on building my animal communication skills before I did that, but it was like going through a PhD program. Like, it's not that it was all focused on animal communication, but I did a lot of my own healing work. I did a lot of my own personal work that I feel like energetically moved and cleared a lot of things in me that allowed the lines of communication to become very open. So, you know, whether it's through my Alchemy of the Soul course or my Animal Soul Channeling course, it is, I think, an important point that it's so important for us to always be open to doing our own work because that does amplify our energy. It makes these energetic connections very clean and very clear. So.
Did you have to go away for 2 years to do that, or were you
No.
able to do that?
No, so I did my training through the Four Winds Society, and at the time, I think, with COVID, they've radically changed how they offer their programs. I think most of it's online now, which I feel like is a little bit of a bummer. Like, this is something that we really need. I think being in community and being present in person is really helpful.
Mhm.
At least when you're actually learning how to do healing work on another being.
Yeah.
I found that to be really beautiful. And their online stuff now, it's like 30 days. And to me, you can't really cram 2 years into 30 days.
Mhm.
But yeah, I went through the Four Winds Society and we would basically go for a week at a time. And they had like a set curriculum. They required you to wait 3 to 4 months in between taking each week because there was a lot of intensive homework and personal work that had to happen, in between all of that. So I did their basic course, which was a year. And I kind of did everything every quarter and moved through that. And then they had an advanced course, which was like another year of classes. So I was living in California at the time, and I was in the Bay Area, and a lot of it was like going to Joshua Tree in Southern California or Park City in Utah. So
Cool.
yeah, it was beautiful. It was like taking a week out of your life, once a quarter
Well,
to go have these like magical experiences. So.
yeah, I was just curious. And then I guess also I'm curious if you feel like if you could talk a little bit about how your own horses, how they have impacted your development as a communicator, or if you have any particular stories about them that you would want to share.
Yeah, I mean, all of my horses have been, I would say, magnificent teachers in ways that I may not have been expecting. And I feel like this is worth saying. I feel like I've helped so many people, with their horses in particular, and even navigating, purchasing a horse to really see like if they're a good fit for one another. Um, I feel like, when a new horse enters our life, there's always the dream and the journey that we think we're going to go on. And then there's usually the one that actually shows up. And sometimes they're one and the same. Sometimes they sort of bounce off of one another. And sometimes it's like two very different experiences. I've had more of the like very different experiences than what my mind created. Um, but I think I have a 5-year-old mare. Her name is Sidera. And I found myself in a place in life where I was without a horse, and I have been a dressage rider for a long time. And at that moment in time, it was 2018, I really wanted a horse that I could do dressage work with. And I kept having dreams about a bay mare. And I was working with an agent and looking at horses in Germany. And I found my gelding Felix, and he was beautiful and magnificent and within my budget. So it was like an immediate yes with him. But what I found so curious is like I kept having these dreams about a bay mare with a star, and there were no bay mares for sale like anywhere. Like they just weren't, nothing was coming across my path. And so I went ahead and had Felix. About a year later, I'll never forget, I was sitting on my couch one day and there was a Hanoverian stallion that I love. His name is Secret. And I think he was 4 at the time because his first crop of foals were just, in the process of being born. And purely from just a place of curiosity, I was like, oh, I'm just going to look online and just see what his babies look like. And I mean, I had no business, looking for a second horse. And I found this breeder up in Canada, and Sedera was less than a week old. Like when I found her ad, she was like 6 days old, I think. And as soon as I saw her picture, and it was a picture of right after she was born, I was like, oh my God, there you are. And I reached out to them and they wanted like $30,000 for a baby. And I'm like, hey, I mean, I can't. And I don't think I want to. Like, I mean, for like a newborn foal, that just at the time felt like a crazy amount of money. So, I had kind of made an offer to the breeder and they really wanted to hang on to her and, you know, get their asking price, which is totally fair. She went under contract like 2 weeks later. And this breeder does offer like payment plans. So she went under contract. So this was like June of 2019. And I felt really heartsick over it, but I was also like, if this was meant to be, it would have worked out. Nothing I can do here. And I got an email from the breeder in November. It was right before Thanksgiving. And she was like, Sidera was under contract that people, can't continue to make the payments. Are you still interested? And I made them an offer and, they accepted it. And that's how she came into my life. So where I think this relates to animal communication, I feel like this horse and I have such a deep soul bond and soul contract. What I find so confirming is she found me in the ethereal realms, like in my dreams. And it was like, I don't know, in my heart, I just knew like this mare is out there. Um, and it's also like confirmed this idea of that what is truly meant for us will always find us. Like, and if something becomes super hard and if there's like a tremendous amount of barriers, it's like, for me, it's always like it makes me stop and go like, okay, but like, is this actually the right thing? And sometimes there is wisdom, in a little bit of a challenge and a journey, but she just kind of confirmed like I really feel like this horse was meant to be in my life no matter what. And, the universe or her or whatever kind of architected a reality that made that possible for us. Um, so that's like one of my favorite sort of like magical connection stories. As far as
Yeah.
like animal communication, I think one of the ways that I use it is our horses are at home. And as I've trusted that ability, it becomes a really useful skill in a lot of ways of just even like doing night checks. Like sometimes if I hear a noise outside, like just being able to check in with them and be like, hey, are you guys okay? Or do you need me to come out? And that for me has been such a beautiful thing to develop because I would say 99% of the time, like they'll tell me like, yeah, everything's fine. Or, I was rolling and like bumped the stall wall, no big deal. And the times that they've needed me, like it's been abundantly clear and like I've heard very clearly, like I need to go outside. So I find it's such a beautiful resource, for all animal owners to have. I use it with my cats too, like with some of their physical stuff. I mean, I'll ask the animals very clearly, like, do you need me to call the vet? Like, do you need the vet? And I really honor and listen to like if it's a yes or a no.
Wow.
So
Your
yeah.
story about your marriage just gave me chills. That
Yeah.
was a really cool
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. I love
You
them.
said sometimes it looks the way you think it's going to look and sometimes it doesn't. Do you have a
Mhm.
story that to expound on times that things haven't turned out the way that you thought they were going to?
I mean, I've got some personal stories of my own, but the way I would say this really like shows up for clients too, it's like I'm sure we've all either experienced or seen these stories where, somebody buys the big fancy horse to do the thing that they want to do. And sometimes, we'll get stuck in a feedback loop where horses keep getting injured
Mm.
over and over and over again. People think that, gosh, I bought this big fancy horse from somewhere else to kind of fulfill this role that they were already doing, and they kind of came into my care, and it's just been one thing after another. So for me, it's always looking at, what is the soul contract between horse and human? Like, what is each individual soul's journey, and what is it, that we're learning, like through whatever challenge is showing up in our relationship. Um, I would say for myself, like getting my gelding Felix, like he, I bought him off of video, but I did go to Germany and spent a week with him, really with the intention. He was 3. He was a stallion. He had like 4 weeks under saddle. And I really wanted to go because I'm like, he's a nice horse. And I'm like, if he's really like the wrong fit, then he'll stay and I'll resell him or, whatever. But I wanted to kind of know what life was like for him before he came and whatnot. And what became very clear through importing him and getting him here in the US, like just his way of navigating the world, like his level of sensitivity and how I needed to show up for him was like wildly different than what I was expecting. I mean, I was really expecting to, have a competitive dressage horse and to compete at a high level. And now where I am, like I've had him for 6 years, I just laugh because I say like I'm a reformed dressage rider. It's something like I kind of vaguely do, but it doesn't look anything like what it used to. He's taken me on this breathwork journey. Like I've never met a horse with a stronger like dorsal vagal shutdown and explosion. So I really had to learn how to regulate my breath and teach him how to breathe. Um, and it's the longer I'm with him, I'm realizing like he's this profound, really powerful teacher. And riding is not really, it's kind of like the side quest of our journey. And he's got kind of a wonky front hoof that, I'm now like he's only 9, but I'm looking at like just with his size and some hoof and limb conformation stuff. I'm like, riding with any real consistency, like maybe off the table for us, for the rest of his life, which
Wow.
I have to honor like the human part of me. There's a little bit of grief around that, but he still has taught me so much and like he's opened my life in so many ways. He's one of my most popular animals in my animal communication class. Like he's really expanded my life in so many ways. And I've had to really surrender my heart to like there's a tremendous amount of love between us and like there is absolutely a journey that we're on together, but he's teaching me and forcing my life to expand and unfold in ways that were just so opposite of what I was intending when I bought him. And it's okay. Like it's really okay.
Yeah, I think that
So
happens more often than people realize that
yeah.
the horses have messages or lessons or
Yeah.
whatever for the human that wasn't in their plan. That wasn't in their
Yeah.
plan.
And like Sedera, it's like her entry point into my life was so cosmic and so heartfelt that I really bought her with, I mean, she's incredibly well bred. And there's, so my engagement with her has been different. It's like there's always been this little bit of a hope of like, if she enjoys like being ridden and doing the work, like I'm really hopeful that that's something we can do together. So it's been just a fun thing where she came into my life in a more feely, heartfelt space of no intention other than I know you're meant to be in my life. And she's actually the one that has this high desire to be in work and to actually do things in a way that, Felix really doesn't. So I don't know. They've both kind of like swapped roles of,
Yeah.
how they were going to show up in my life, but
I think it's
it's
cool to
great.
be able to honor that though, to be able to tune into and honor what
Yeah.
each horse wants out of their
Yeah.
experience.
It, and I will say, like brutal honesty, like it requires a lot of emotional authenticity. And what I always tell people, like, it's okay to grieve what you thought was going to be and what's not there. It would be so fake of me to be on here and to be like, yeah, Felix urban things, and we're just going to sort of beautifully glide off, into a different connection. There's been real grief. There's been a lot of sleepless nights. There's been a lot of worry. There's been me dismantling a lot of ego stuff. Like it's required me to do a lot of work, but when I sit with, you know, do I continue this journey with this horse or do I find them a person
Mm.
who might be more appropriate for what their soul is wanting? And I feel with all 3 that I have now, it's like there's a deep intention and a purpose here, and the thought of them not being in my life creates more grief than the grief of what I thought our time together would be like. But yeah, but it
That-
hasn't been without a lot of like A lot
Yeah,
of,
no,
there have
but
been tears. There will be tears. Like, you
that's
know,
very powerful though. And I think that's good
yeah,
for people to hear that,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
just
I think
what
it's
you said.
important for people to know, like, it's okay to grieve. Like, if you had a dream and a wish for your horse, and if for whatever reason that's not possible, or if they're requiring you to pivot, I feel like for any of us, like as we move into more reciprocal relationship with our horses, and as we really examine like how we feel about riding and training, and how do we do that in a way that feels beneficial for both parties, I think there's sort of this idea that it's like it should be this really fluffy realization to come to. And I think the really honest thing is like there's a lot of grief. There's, I think, a lot of grief moving through the horse world right now, and a lot of shame over how we've treated horses and how we've shown up. And it's important to not judge yourself, for feeling that way, and you just allow yourself to feel it and be really honest about what you need moving forward and what your horses need moving forward also.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's good. I guess I'm just gonna ask you one more question.
Yeah.
If you had just one piece of advice that you would offer the listeners, just of how they could improve their connection with their horse, what would you have them do, or what would you tell them?
For me, it always comes back to um, really developing a conscious relationship with yourself. I think we often tend to use or to look to our animals for like emotional stability and support. And I feel like in wanting to deepen our relationship with our animals, sometimes, not all the time, but I think sometimes we can kind of slip into these codependent relationships
Mm,
that don't really serve either one of us. So I feel like the more that, for me, it comes down to like pausing and breathing so often, coming back into your body, being very clear of like your emotional state in any given moment and why you may or may not be triggered, by something, but really tending to our interior self, to our heart, and to our emotional needs, so that we can come to our horses in a really well-regulated way. To me, this is like any relationship in life. It's like when we really grow and develop and become very clear as to who we are and like what we're bringing to the table, it allows for so much blossoming growth and connection in all of our relationships, and our animals are no different. So really, I think I've been feeling this urge to tell people it's like our animals are such an important part of our lives and our emotional selves, but they should not have to carry the burden of our emotional experiences, meaning like that's our responsibility as a human to do our own personal work, to be on our own journey, and to use our animals as guides, to have them be our friends, like on these journeys. But it can't always be about fixing the horse. Like we have to be willing to like look at ourselves as well.
that's incredibly powerful, and
Yeah.
I think a beautiful way to
Yeah.
close this. Do you want to tell the listeners how they can find you and about what
Yeah.
offerings that you have?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is tracyrainwaters.com. So I am really loving doing my one-on-one channeled sessions. So I do them for any type of animal, and I also do sessions for humans as well. So I've got offerings for both, and those are on my website. And then also I'm primarily on Instagram for social media, and my handle, it's just at dr.rainwaters. And I'm really kind of committed to doing longer form content on YouTube. So I'm about to go on vacation, but when I come back at the end of October, I'm gonna be putting more long form video content on YouTube. So, and that my YouTube is just called The Wisdom of Their Voices.
Beautiful.
So,
Cool.
yeah,
And I will put all that information in the show notes as
thank
well.
you.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask that you want to add before we close out for today?
No, well, I mean, it's been a beautiful conversation, so thank you. But I just want to say, like, I really believe um, that there is so much beauty and power, coming from the animal kingdom towards humanity, and really helping us open our hearts and evolve our consciousness. So I would say no matter where you find yourself on your journey in this moment in time, whether you feel like you're really being dismantled and kind of taken to your knees, or if you feel like you're finally finding your pathway forward, you're exactly where you are meant to be. Your animals love you tremendously, and they are always there as a resource when it's needed. So,
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for joining us.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
What a lovely conversation with Dr. Tracy Rainwaters. Thanks for listening. Check out the show notes for details on all of Tracy's offerings and where you can find her online. And if you're enjoying these podcasts, please like and share. And be sure to join us at www.patreon.com/mymagicalhorse. Until next time, namaste, friends.